Our next guest has been on this show at least twice. This is Dr. Ming Wang here in Nashville, Tennessee. Could we welcome Dr. Wang to the show? I just love to talk to you. You know, when Ming was on, I think the last time you said you had emails from like...
over 100 countries.
Over 100 countries emailed him. Over 100 countries. In fact, let me just stop and say that he's a world-renowned eye surgeon, has done over 55,000 eye procedures. And I feel like there's a movie in What About Bob, where the psychiatrist goes over and holds up his own book. I don't want to do that. But in this book, Ming, I have 7 atheists that went from atheism to faith in this book, God's Not Dead. And Ming actually came to Harvard University as an atheist. And at Harvard, came to faith. Now think about this. Skeptics say, oh, your faith depends on where you were born. Well, Ming was born in China. And even though he was raised as an atheist, you came to faith at university. So Ming, welcome. But talk about that. I've jumped way ahead of myself, but we're there, so let's just go with it. So you get to Harvard as an atheist, and what happens?
You know, I always say that people who appreciate sight the most are those who are blind. And who people truly appreciate the value of faith are those who used not to have faith. And to me, faith is something I found in my life through searching, through trying to find answers to questions in my life. When I was at Harvard, you know, it's a powerhouse of intellect, academic achievement, and of course, all their teaching is science-based and reasoning-based. And I was very gung-ho and very confident I was going to find all the answers in life in sciences. And the interesting thing is, as I study more science, I found there are more unknown questions I have. And it's paradoxical. I thought more science I study, then I would be able to answer more questions. Then opposite happened. More science I study, medicine, biology, physics, and more unknowns I have. And I have more questions to which I have no answer. For example, I study the anatomy of the eye, the human brain. It's amazing the number of neuronal synapses connecting our visual cortex, the ganglion cells, the retinal photoreceptors to the brain. The number of neuronal synapses in one person's brain is equal to all the stars we ever discovered as human beings of the entire universe. So I began to question, how could such a complex structure evolve out of random? And then I studied the lifetime of universe, which is presumably 13 billion years based on Big Bang theory. But then I calculate mathematically, just to have all the photoreceptors, the retina, and the vision, perception, interpretation. It would probably take trillions of years if we have any chance, because random collision has so much other possible combinations before we truly reach this one. So I was in crisis. I was truly in crisis of a man of science, born as atheist, and never thought that anything else, you know, other than science. And I found science was powerless in terms of answering some of the most fundamental questions. And right then, as I was in my crisis, I was puzzled and I was struggling. And a professor, a pediatric professor, sensed that. And he is himself a Christian, and he saw an opportunity. He saw a crack in opportunity in this young man who was so gung-ho and so strong-minded about science. So he took me out for lunch one day. He said, Ming, what's across the street? I said, oh, that's a car. He said, what's the difference between a car and human brain? And I said, well, human brain is a lot more complicated. He said, okay. Ming, is it possible? Can you imagine a powerful piece of metals, random power piece of metals, assemble itself into a car? I said, no way. He said, but how about human brain? Right then and there, he opened a window in my life and suggested to me very powerfully, there's something much more important, much more fundamental, much more deeper and wider meaning than science. So I began to open myself to Christianity, to the teaching of Jesus Christ. And finally I realized that God sets in motion, and we can affect the course of our history and what we do. We do have free will, as that in the God's Not Dead movie, same. God gave us a free will. He doesn't allow us to make mistakes. But sometimes through the mistakes, we learn. So I realized that faith is much more fundamental. And I also find faith and science is not contradictory. It can work together.
And this is important. This is one of when we've done some things together on campuses, and usually I'm just kind of the warm-up band for you. But talk about that conflict, that people perceive that faith and science are at odds, but as you've said, they're answering different questions, but they do complement each other. Talk about that.
Today, in 21st century, our life has been transformed in a fundamental way by science. iPad, iPhones, everything you see is transformed by science and technology. So it is very important for men and women of faith to confront the transforming effect of science and still be able to answer all the major questions of society, not shy away from it. For example, stem cell research, fetal tissue research. We know that when a person gets older, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, the best way to treat an older person, the disease, illness, is using young tissue. And the best tissue to treat an older person is, for example, fetal tissue or unborn child. But at the same time, to hurt the baby for the benefit of adult, we as Christians, we do not believe in that. It's morally wrong. But at the same time, if we don't do this research on young tissues, how can we treat disease of old? So it appears science and faith are conflicting. They are foes. However, I truly believe that sometimes it may be a conflicting to us as mortal human beings, but that's why we're mortal and God is immortal. It's because we don't know better, but we have to have the faith and confidence that God loves us. He doesn't want us to stop improving the quality of lives. He wants us to continue research to improve the quality of lives.
And just in that very issue of stem cell research, you actually had a breakthrough discovery in terms of you don't have to hurt the child to get the young tissue. Why don't you give away what you did? We had a video last time, but just tell what you discovered.
And I didn't believe that we have to hurt the baby to benefit adult, but I surely wants to know how the little baby can heal so magically, and hopefully study that question without hurting the baby. And we kept on at it, kept on. It's very difficult.
In other words, what you're saying is that within the womb, the recovery and healing processes are just almost miraculous. In other words, the ability for the baby within the womb to heal if something goes on. And so you were saying, how can we reproduce that environment that's in the womb out here
without touching the baby? Yes. Because every baby before birth has the ability called regeneration. And once we are born, we take on the ability called fibrosis. It's no longer regenerate, we scar. So I want to know how the little baby can heal without scarring, because that can help my adult patients after injury. Scarring is what causes visual loss. So we didn't give up, persisted. Eventually we found that, each baby, after the baby is born, there's this placenta, the amniotic membrane, and it's always discarded. And we thought maybe let's just salvage the placenta and harvest this piece of sac that used to surround the unborn child in mother's womb, and perhaps this membrane, the amniotic membrane, may confer the same scarless regenerative ability as the baby, him or herself. But it's a blanket. It was connected to the baby, but then it was discarded after birth. So we started doing research. I got these membranes donated by mothers who, after giving birth to children, donate those placenta to us. In the laboratory, I cut out this piece of membrane and make it into baby membrane contact lens and put on adult injured eyes. And these eyes...
Are you listening to this? He took the placenta and made almost a contact lens to put it over an injured eye.
Yes, adult. And because these adults have lost the ability to regenerate ever since birth, so we recreate a fetus-like environment on adult injured eyes. And we didn't know what's going to happen. It was very exciting, and we let the membrane sit there, the recreating fetus-like environment on adult injured eyes for 2 weeks. Then 2 weeks later, when we removed the fetal membrane from the eyeball of patients who have suffered injury, they're all destined to be blind due to scarring. We remove it, we see a clear vision eye, no scar.
Amazing.
So the whole laboratory celebrated the scientific achievement. The amniotic membrane contact lens recreate the regenerative ability of a fetus on an adult. And we published papers, we got US patents. But to me, much more exciting, much more important is a validation of this concept that science and faith are friends. They can work together. And God does want us to do research. He wants us to improve the quality of lives through research, but He wants us to do it in the right way, in His way. In this case, He gave us this piece of memory. He said, you worked on it. And so sometimes in research, when we see faith and science clashes, an answer may not be clear, but the true test of faith is, even though it's not clear to us, we still believe the answer is there.
Ming, you know, it's really just a matter of historical ignorance when people think that somehow science and faith are at odds, because science rose out of a Christian worldview. It was the belief, as you know, that the universe was understandable. In fact, Einstein said the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that the universe is comprehensible. So why would this universe correspond to mathematic order? Why do you, from the beginning of the universe at the Big Bang, as scientists call it, were these like dials, like these numbers that whether it be gravity or the strong or weak nuclear force, it's like you having if you had a universe starter kit, how much gravity you put in the universe. And that dial has to be set, that number so specific with trillions and trillions of options. And so from the very beginning, you see the intelligence. And scientists believed that the universe, if we seek and study the universe, it will yield answers. And I think that people say, well, you're just one of these people that say if we don't know the answer, then the answer is just God. Like that's going to stymie research. That's like when my kids, when we do homeschooling, and I say, okay, what's the answer to this math problem? No, my kids don't put in the fill in the blank, Jesus. I said, look, I know you love Jesus, but I'm wanting a math answer. Don't write in Jesus in the fill in the blank and think because I'm a pastor, I'm going to go, well, that's the right answer. No, that's the wrong answer for this question. Yes, Jesus is the author of the mathematical order of the universe, but there's an answer here. So I've never met a Christian, especially sitting in the presence of one who was a scientist, who sat back and said, oh, I don't have to research because I believe God did it all. No, your faith in God and your belief that He has ordered the universe drives you to seek answers. Why don't you talk about that?
You know, sometimes scientists, we could become very pompous, big-headed, think that we invented everything and we do all the research and we're the ones. No, actually, I look at the word research. I call it re-search. It's to research, re-identify, discover the creation that God has laid there in the first place. So we are very privileged, not because we create things, invent things, but because we are privileged to discover the gloria and the magics of God's original creation. So at the end of the day, we have to know whatever we do, attribute to Him. And at the same time, I think it's challenging today, not only in universities, in much parts of the world, where students of science, they see all the transforming effect of science and technology, iPad and iPhone, forgetting behind science, what's leading it, is God, is faith. And I think just like the pediatric professor at Harvard who once showed me the way through the car and human brain analogy, I think all of us, Christians and scientists, have the obligation, have the duty to help educate young people, the students, to not only study science, be the best scientist you can, invention, discoveries, but at the same time, be humble to know that what wholly, truly guides you is God. And I think one of the things, your book, God is Not Dead, is one thing that I feel you are doing something very uniquely important, because it's not a preaching book, it's an evidence book. You're suggesting through the lives of different people you describe in the book and in the movie that evidence of the existence of God. And I don't know how much we can give away in the movie, we probably should not be able to talk about, but I think three places in the movie where the reasoning, let's use logic, arguing against.
Let me stop and just say this, because when I was writing this book, I was driving down the road and I was with a friend of mine who invests in movies, and he said, And I was describing the book I was writing, and so he said, that needs to be a movie. So he picks up the phone and he calls PureFlix, and he says, you need to meet this guy and talk about this. So they came to Nashville and we sat and met, and then they followed me out to UCLA, and they said, let's see how you're talking to students. And so I sat with the screenwriters, and they said, well, just tell us what you do, because we're on maybe 700 campuses around the world. So I'm a pastor by day, but really my passion is campus ministry. And so in telling them the stories, I told them about you. And I said, let me tell you about this Chinese doctor who came to America as an atheist, came to Harvard, came to Christ at Harvard. So in the movie, they put one of the main characters as a Chinese student that is based upon my description of Ming Wang. So when I showed Ming that, I couldn't wait. He just saw the movie just the other night, and I just said, for the first time, I screened it, let he and his wife, I said, you've got to see this, because the Ming Wang character is in there. And my wife was quick to say, oh, I think you're better looking than that character. No, he's a good-looking guy. I mean, y'all are both handsome men. But Ming, I tell you what, just to see that in the movie, this Chinese character who faces persecution, and I think that's one of the underlying themes. There is persecution when you believe, and you see this in the movie because this Chinese student that was kind of inspired by your life is having to describe back home, and you see these phone conversations between him and the parents. How real is that persecution? Because we know that a lot of what goes on in China is an underground church. It's not, a lot of what God is doing is not just what the state supports, but people having to almost worship in secret at times. Talk about that impact of persecution and the freedom that we have here.
Yes. I grew up in China during what they call Cultural Revolution or Cultural Holocaust. From 1966 to 1976, the dictating government, the communist government, prosecuted 20 million young people, sent them away, deportation program. I suffered through that. I was not allowed to go to high school and college. And eventually I was lucky, came to this country with $50, with an English-Chinese dictionary, but with a big American dream. So as I said at the beginning, people who truly appreciate sight are those who are blind. People who truly appreciate faith are those who used not to have it and suffered through void, through frustration, and I was one of them. And in this movie, I think the character, his life kind of mirrored my life in many ways, because he came from PRC, China, and he's in a family, their father was not supportive of his pursuing of faith. Yet he was similar to me in a way that he was searching. He was trying to understand why things are a certain way, and he was inspired by this young student who was bold enough to defend faith. And so his life mirrored mine, and like many others. I mean, there are 1.4 billion people in China, but only 5% are Christians. So 95% people are without Christianity or faith. And China economically is developing so great today. They no longer believe in communism, they believe in capitalism. But at the same time, with the fall down of communist ideology, people need new moral guidance, new code of conduct. So it's a spiritual vacuum. That's why corruption ran rampant today in China. So the answer to curb corruption, to improve people's moral fabrics, and is to not just have clothes to wear, but also clothes for your mind and heart, is Christianity. So that's why we have the China Bible Project, and to doubly translate English Chinese to China, and for the 95% of people who are not Christians. And this project has the potential of possibly recruit for God's kingdom, quarter of human population.
Ming, it's fantastic. I'm going to go back to one of the previous times you were on TBN, and it was really an amazing story, and it bears repeating. There was a woman, and if I tell this wrong, you correct it, but there was a woman watching this show in Morocco who was going blind or was blind in one eye, and within a week of watching this show and hearing the stories of how you basically, in Ming's foundation, they bring people who have been blinded for different reasons, and they bring them here, and not only Ming, but you have other doctors that help you, and they basically donate the services, and they reverse this blindness. it really is a stunning thing. And you have a big event called the Eyeball, which is a big formal dance. I've been to the Eyeball, and it's pretty cool. I don't want to showcase all my dancing skills except once a year, and that's at the Eyeball. But and then you bring these children out that have been blind or whoever. But this woman in Morocco sees this TBN show, and just gets on a plane and flies to Nashville, and shows up at your office. Now you pick up the story. What happened?
Her sight was rapidly deteriorating, and she's a young lady in her 30s, and she was getting blinder and blinder every day. So she was so worried that she would be totally blind very soon. And she just had a little bit sight left, and with that little remaining sight, almost the light in her life almost got snipped off. Just before that, she saw this show with that little remaining sight.
Amazing.
And she decided she needed to fly out here, and
so she just shows up in Nashville?
Yes, and our foundation helped her, and we did 2 laser procedures and restore her sight, reverse the course of her disease. And it turns out that she had an unknown, undiagnosed eye condition for all these years. And I think that's God's miracle. See that here's a woman there who almost lost everything. And at the last step, the last bit, God rescued her, bring her to sight. And I think God, many times, tests our faith and strength, letting us go as far as we can go and see whether we truly believe in Him.
Yeah, one of the most, I think we need to praise the Lord on that one. Ming, one of the most touching stories that I remember and was a part of, witnessing the testimony was a little girl in India she was from India, right? And her mother?
Kajol, a stepmother.
Her stepmother had blinded her, poured acid into her eyes so that she would get more money to say, go out and sing, and if you're blind, they'll have more pity on you. So can you imagine your stepmother blinding you intentionally? And so here this little girl was found on the streets, and tell quickly, we just have a few minutes,
her name is
how she made her way to Nashville and what happened.
Her name is Kajol. She was 4.5 years old, and her stepmother poured acid into her eyes when she was sleeping one night in an attempt to create a blind child singer who would get more money from tourists. Kajol was blinded, but then they found out she could not sing, so they abandoned her. And we found her in the train station near Calcutta, India. Brought her to the United States with loving help and lots of people. The foundation, we did 1 major surgery, restored limited degree of her sight. At our annual event, the Eyeball, Kajol was the one who led the first dance in her little cute outfit. Then afterwards, I gave her a microphone. I said, Kajol, say something to the 500, 600 Eyeball attendees, big uncle, aunties who love you so much. Kajol took the microphone, and she broke into a big smile because she had a little secret. In her little 5-year-old mind, she figured that the reason she was abandoned in India after she being intentionally blinded was because she could not sing. So she wants to prove that she's worth keeping. So after she came to this country, she made a few children friends of hers. And Kajol learned to sing. So at the Eyeball, at that moment after her dance, I gave her the microphone. And she broke into a big smile because she didn't tell any one of us. She just sang a song. And the song that Kajol sang in front of 500, 600 Eyeball attendees and sing this beautiful young lady suffered such a atrocity and just unbelievable, and still came back in strong and knowing that life can continue, and he wants to thank someone, and he wants to sing the song. She wants to sing the song. And the song that Kajol chose to sing all by herself without telling anyone else at that moment at the Eyeball was Jesus Loves Me.
Dr. Ming Wang, thank you so much. Can we thank Dr. Wang? Amazing, amazing.
Thank you.